Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Geo and Joey Show. Joey, how you doing today?
Better than I deserve, but tired as heck.
Yes, tell them why you're tired, buddy.
Yeah, I just been up late traveling. So I was in. The reason I wasn't on the show last week is because I was in Washington D.C. for the Young America's Foundation National Conservative Student Conference, and I got to kind of try to network with some different people, and it was a really cool event. YAF puts
So,
on a great show.
so tell the people what the event is actually about and what made you decide to attend.
Yeah, so YAF actually. So I go to a small Christian school here in Michigan, and I'm a member of YAF. They want me to start a chapter at my school, and so they agreed to pay for me to come out to this conference, and they
Oh,
get me hooked
wow.
up, spread conservative values on campus of Andrews University here in Michigan.
Yes. So, what are the values of this organization?
Yeah, so
I mean,
YAF.
you can't assume the people know what I mean?
Yeah, so YAF Young America's Foundation, right? It was founded. So for those who don't know, there's the Sharon Statement, which is kind of a simplified like statement of belief that has kind of guided the conservative movement in America um, since I believe around the 50s or 60s. But basically, YAF started in the home of William F. Buckley Jr., who's basically the founder of the modern American conservative movement, and it's very much evolved and shaped itself around the views of Buckley and Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, actually, when he was president, the conference that I was at, he would host it on the White House lawn. That's how entangled it is. And then YAF actually bought the Reagan Ranch, which was called his Western White House out
Hmm.
in California. That's their headquarters now. And they also bought his boyhood home. So it's very much Reagan conservatism, which is the strain of conservatism that I most
Adhere
close.
to. Okay, and so tell me some of the highlights. Well, tell me what day was the conference beginning? When did you arrive? What'd you do? And then we'll talk about how you got some video of the riots there in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. So yeah, to what Gio's alluding to, the timing of this trip coincided with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's trip to DC, and we could tell when we went on the street. But anyway, so it was last week. It was Monday through Friday, and they had various speakers. Probably the highlight, well, I guess just because of the nature of his position, um, I believe it was Tuesday night. The banquet speaker was Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. That was pretty crazy, seeing like Secret Service around and stuff. So that one was crazy. Probably the highlight for me though was the North Korean defector Yeonmi Park telling her story. I think that was a Wednesday night or Thursday night. I don't remember. It was Thursday night. That was very powerful, and it made me like. First of all, everyone, these videos are on YouTube. Maybe I'll shoot a link out later, but everyone needs to go and watch Yon. If you have some college student or some young person, or if you yourself ever take find yourself taking advantage or taking for granted the way we live here in the United States, right? Given all the problems and everything, right? If you ever are taking for granted how good of a life you have, go listen to her story and then sit down and shut up because we have it very, very good in the United States of America.
Yeah, look, I have gone to countries that aren't communistic or aren't like China, but I have gone to Dominican Republic, not the resorts, the regular common folk area. I've been to Peru on mission trips. My wife has been to Bangladesh, even though these countries are relatively free as far as you can say things, you can move, maneuver. When you see though the poverty they live in, and then on top of that, you add in places like China is not poor, but there are areas where they are oppressed. You think of North Korea as well, where they are oppressed on top of the fact that they're poor. It's not a good living conditions. And obviously, when you come here and you have people crying about uh, I don't know, first world problems. You know what I mean? You begin to realize how well you have it here in the United States. So,
So one story that
mhm.
Yonmi told that really moved me, and it's pardon the language, but this was part of the story. So she was saying how, as a kid in school, this is how the indoctrination in North Korea, like it was so thorough. One of the things was when talking about Americans in school, they had to refer to Americans as the American bastards. And so much so that even when they would have math assignments, they would be like, you have four American bastards and you killed two American bastards. How many American bastards do you have left? Right? That kind of thing. And then as soon as she told that story, like just that rah rah moment, she's like, well, as of, and I forget exactly what the date, she said, I'm officially an American bastard too. And it was a very moving moment and it stuck with me.
Well, I mean, you don't. What do they say? You don't appreciate what you have until it's missing, right? She's kind of done it in reverse. She understands now the beauty of the American government, even the American ideals. Even though we're a hot mess at the moment, and political season brings out the worst in people, we still have a political season in which to potentially change, right? Different leaders and things like that. We're still afforded that right for the time being, and for the most part, most people think the elections are on the up and up, even though you'll find irregularities here and there. I want to put a video that you sent me and tell me what's going on here.
These, this is the anti-Israel protest. This is probably not the worst of it. Again, I'm out here hours after Netanyahu's actual speech, but there's still, I feel like the ones left are the less rowdy. The police have been here, so they tamped down a lot of the craziest stuff. That's kind of like an ISIS case. A lot of shouts of stop the genocide, right? End all US aid to Israel. A lot of people criticizing Biden. Just it's kind of insane how there's so many people so freaking ignorant. They don't know what they're protesting, flying the flags of terrorist states. We have a serious moral legitimacy problem in this country, and this is all behind the U.S. Capitol. Anti-Israel, anti-American, anti-decency.
So, what would you say is, well, about how many people were there at that point? There had to be more when the
Oh
speech
yeah,
was going on, but quick estimation, how many people you think were there?
um, couple hundred people at
Mm-hmm.
that point. So I only saw video of this later. I was not
Mm-hmm.
at Union Station. Union Station is where the massive protests were.
Yeah.
This was just on the I forget what I don't think it's the south side, but behind the Capitol. And
Mm-hmm.
so I went. So that group, as you saw, I was walking. There's a group over there. I
Mm-hmm.
went over to that group, but I didn't dare have my camera out because I didn't want to get like in an altercation. But when I went to that group, they're all standing in a circle. There were different people passing a mic around. They were chanting about how the U.S. is the great Satan and Israel, and it props up the small Satan, Israel, and not that group. So there were some people. This wasn't me, but there was some people from our YAF group who saw there were some people like trampling on an Israeli flag, and apparently a couple of the Yaffers, right, that's the group I was with, like grabbed the Israeli flag and ran to try to get the Israeli flag out of there. I wasn't there for that, but I I contrasted because so the media has talked about this in a generally negative sense, but I want everybody to remember the Unite the Right Charlottesville rally and the level of outrage. Now listen, that was bad. Right, white supremacists of any kind, I condemn them. Right, that's wrong. It's evil. That was a fraction of what we saw descend upon our nation's capital in actual support of a terrorist organization, and yet most people can't in the mainstream anyway couldn't find proper words to condemn to condemn it. I just think it shows a moral sickness, really, in our society.
Did you see what took place at Union Station though? By now,
Only
no,
videos and news.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. In videos though, you've seen it, right?
Yeah.
So obviously here in the United States, and I've been meaning to ask you this. So here in the United States, we have freedom of speech, right? And unfortunately, the Supreme Court in a ruling said that burning the flag is protected speech. Now, granted, we'll talk about that here in a bit, and that's the question I want to ask you. How did you feel about what happened, and how would you have handled it? About what you saw in Union Square? Because I have my 2 cents, but I want to hear yours.
To say the words are pissed off. As far as the legality, first of all, what happened at Union Station was 100% illegal in the sense that, listen, I may agree with the Supreme Court in the sense that if you have an American flag and you burn it, you shouldn't go to jail. Now, I have the right to call you a lot of things, right, to your face, but maybe not go to jail. But to be very clear, this was not their American flag. This was an American flag on a national monument. This is public property. You have no right to vandalize other people's property or public property. So the law coming in and arresting people there would have been totally and completely just. And I think some people did get arrested, but
they were released the very next day.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically with no bail, or no bail needed to be posted. Look, yes, I think that's the legality is that if you own an American flag, you have the right to burn it in protest. But like you mentioned, several things I didn't like. One, they're taking down a public flag on public property that is basically, privately owned in the sense that it's owned by we the people, right? Not only that, they graffitied monuments and all over the place, and the replica of the Liberty Bell as well. They graffitied that. And not only did they graffiti that, they're putting the flag of a terrorist organization on our soil near our capital. And on top of that, they are definitely, you said it yourself, you heard them, America's the great Satan. And look, I got my issues with America, but that's biblical, not for its ideals, right? The ideals it wants to express. And so personally, if that was me, and then I don't know if you saw the videos, they were dragging police officers. While they were, you didn't see that? They were dragging, in the videos, right? They're dragging police officers. They're putting police officers at risk, at jeopardy. I would have came down hard.
Same.
I would have came down hard. I would have brought in mounted police, and I would have been cracking skulls. And let's not literally cracking skulls, but I'd be arresting people left and right. You are chanting for the death of the very empire and which protects your right to protest.
Yeah. And contrast that with the way, listen, January 6th was also a criminal event, right? I've been very clear. Like, the people that broke into the Capitol, that was wrong, and they deserved a just punishment. But anyone that was within, I know people that did not go into the Capitol on January 6th, but were there, and that they got calls from the FBI, right? Like, they went through anyone that was anywhere near. They were contacting. They were trying to figure out if you did anything they could. Are we going to see that same level of effort with this protest? I have my doubts.
Yeah, and look, and going over Twitter, you can't trust everything you see, even from credible people, because they may be nefarious, but they may make mistakes. But I saw Elon Musk type in Trump assassination, or type in Trump, and all he got was stories of Kamala, what's her name again?
Kamala Harris.
Yeah, Kamala Harris. I was going to pronounce this Kamala Harris, right? And then other people posted stuff that they asked Facebook AI if the Trump assassination was real, and they said it was fake. So you could see how the media is so biased against anything conservative values. As a matter of fact, let me see if I do it here on the screen for the people. Oh no, let me check this out here. Trump. Yeah, it's, let me see, where was it? So if you look at the screen here, right, I type in Trump, and yes, it gives me Donald Trump, but it just gives me basically images. And then everything is about news about Kamala Harris. It's like, are we really?
Well, we know. I mean, and like I said, like I'm not the biggest Trump fan, but we know for a fact that these social media companies are skewed to the left. They
Mm-hmm.
are. I would ever recommend everyone look into the work of Robert Epstein. Not that Epstein, Robert
Yeah.
Epstein, and he's a researcher. And by the way, he leans left, right? He leans
Mm-hmm.
Democratic. He's an honest guy, and he's chronicled how like he's actually been able to prove through stats that tech companies are able to manipulate a certain percentage of votes every single election, right? That like with like almost crystallized like perception, like
Precision.
accuracy,
Mm-hmm.
precision. Yeah. So they have a massive effect on our democracy, and it's something that really nobody is taken seriously. The other thing is I don't know if you saw that video going around of Kamala, and like it was funny,
Yeah.
right? Elon shared it too, but it was
Mm-hmm.
just saying all this stuff, like bad stuff about herself or whatever. But it
Mm-hmm.
sounded like it was her. I'm
Well,
like,
some of it was her. That's the
but
beauty of it.
the way the
Some
video was put together, though, it
No, no, of
wasn't.
course not, not. But some of it, that's the danger. That's the danger of the video. But you got to understand it's a parody, right? Because some of it were her own actual words, obviously spliced in a negative form, then interspersed with AI voice that makes it sound almost exactly the same. And did you see the confrontation between him and Governor Newsom from California?
Between Elon.
Yeah.
Oh, I did not. I don't think.
Oh, mercy. And the only reason I bring it up is because for a split second, Elon Musk had me, like split second, right? So Governor Newsom says that, let me see if I find it. Governor Newsom says, we are going to pass a law that prohibits, let's see if I can find Elon. I follow. That prohibits the use of AI commercials, right? Like this, in order to protect free speech or whatever else he's arguing about. But then Elon says, come on, I gotta find it. How many times does this man post that it's all the way down at the bottom or something? Well, then Elon says, well, according to Dr. So and so, and for a split second, I couldn't pronounce the doctor's name, and I'm not gonna pronounce it here. But if you look at the tweet, I was like, oh man, I can't believe he roasted Newsom. I'm not. Let me see if it's there. Oh, come on. Let me find it. Well, I guess I'm not going to go there. Maybe the Lord doesn't want me to. Because it was vulgar. Uh, yeah.
Elon did that.
Yeah, I don't have to do that. But I was shocked that. And then somebody posted, it's a good time to be alive. Because look, regardless of what you feel about Trump or Kamala Harris, what I've noticed, because I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, that Twitter or X is the only place where you can have free speech, really. Facebook is so biased. When the Trump assassination happened, I couldn't find a single thing on the Trump assassination on Facebook. Not a single thing. And I thought, okay, maybe delayed. But on X, man, I was getting everything like almost real time, right?
Yeah.
Facebook, nada. And it shows you how
And
biased things are.
I have to say, X or Twitter or whatever is way more so like I have a Threads account. But like
Hmm.
listen, part of what I like about X is that there's
Yeah,
people who there's liberals and leftists, there's conservatives who have different, views than I do, right? And so it's
all
like
the range.
back and forth and whatever. I'm Threads, right? Like I'm a conservative. It's like everything I scroll through, it's all like left wing posts, and it's all like left wingers like congratulating each other and
Hmm.
hurrahing each other. I'm like, this is so boring, right? Like, so yeah.
Yes, exactly. I have a Threads account as well, and yeah, I hardly use it because it's just boring. So let me ask you this question: You're not a Trump fan, and you're not a Kamala Harris fan.
To say I'm not a Kamala Harris fan is the understatement of the century.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I saw your tweet where you are arguing with somebody, where you said you weren't going to vote for Trump and you're definitely not voting for Kamala. And the guy said, well, a non vote for Trump is voting for Kamala. First of all, that's dumb because it is. But why are you so strongly against voting for Trump?
Yeah, I think as conservatives we made okay. First of all, I want to preface this. I think that this election is a very difficult. Let's just say this. I think for Reaganite, like constitutional loving conservatives, there is no candidate on the ballot. And I think a lot of good people in that camp, right, like
Hmm.
the person I voted for, Nikki Haley, are looking at the equation and they're weighing the odds. And I understand why a lot of good people are going to vote for Trump. Listen, I have friends who are going to vote for Kamala. So I get it. There are good people who, when they weigh the cost benefit analysis, come out differently. Just for me, well, by the way, that was me in 2016. 2020, I was less apprehensive, like I was more okay with Trump.
Hmm.
But then January 6th and the election stuff was like a deal breaker. But then also, the more I think about it, is I feel like by accepting this lowering of the standards, we've only ensured that the next time around, that's the same batch we're going to get, right? And if Republicans keep doing the same thing and they still get, the votes of the moral majority or the conservatives or whatever you want to call it,
Hmm. Yeah.
then they're just going to assume like, yeah, we can keep doing this, and they're just going to come along anyway. The biggest example is abortion. Um, the Republican Party has basically, in their platform, changed to a soft core, like pro-choice party, and they did that because I think because they see, well, the left is really bad, and so if we moderate, right, we're still going to get the pro-lifers anyway. And I understand the argument, and like I've been telling people for a long time, I don't think Republicans should run on the abortion issue because they'll lose.
Hmm.
But what I see is something else where they've lowered that standard entirely. And if pro-lifers, the great Catholic philosopher, actually, Edward Fesser, Ed Fesser, he was actually detailing this in a couple of threads where it's like, listen, if Republicans are rewarded with the pro-life and the evangelical and the conservative vote, even after betraying them, the lesson they're going to take from that is we have these votes in the bag, so we can do whatever we want, regardless of what these people think. If enough pro-lifers or whatever say like, no, we're not going to just go along, and Republicans lose, they got to start courting for the vote again, and that's my underlying philosophy. No matter who the candidate is, it's why I reject the binary choice narrative. It's not up to us to earn the right to vote for one of these guys. It's up to them to earn our vote. And if they don't do that, this is we have a secret ballot for a reason, right? Like this is a conscience thing. And if
Hmm.
they don't earn your vote, you have no obligation to give it to them.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Look, I guess one way to look at it from my standpoint is that I have the luxury of not having to vote. Let's
Because you
just
live in
put it
Texas.
that way, because I live in Texas. But you're in a swing state, man. So what do you tell people?
I tell them you should get your candidate to try to win conservatives' votes.
Hmm. All right. So okay. So outside of that, for the people who are listening,
And I want to clarify, I am going to vote. right? I'm gonna write some. I'm gonna probably write in like Condoleezza Rice or Nikki Haley or something.
Hmm.
But I'm gonna definitely vote. And everyone, I do think, and this is something I do think is important. If you're a citizen, like look at all of the different down ballot races. Look at the top ballot, right? Maybe you make a different decision.
Hmm.
That's fine too, right? That's your right. But like vote, like exercise your right, like go down, like know who's running for senator. And I'm certainly going to be voting for a lot of down ballot Republicans.
Yeah, that's different. I was talking about top of the ticket. Yeah, people should vote and vote your conscience, obviously, regardless of party. That being said, um, Roe v. Wade was overturned, right? And so now it's something of the past. And basically the decisions have been made to the state, right? It's up to the states now. Now, granted, to be clear to anybody listening, Joey and I would both want for abortion to be illegal even at the state level. That being said, it is a state issue. How would you say is the best way to go about making that law while still keeping the democratic process?
Yeah, so it's a hard question. Um, and I actually got an answer actually at this conference that I was at.
Okay, good,
That's
good, good. Let's hear it.
But the thing that I'll say is we have to recognize the country, like my position, is out of step with the majority of the country. That's
Hmm.
clearly the case, right? Like it would be delusional for me to say that there's really a secret majority that's as pro life as Joey is. That's not true. And
Hmm.
so recognizing that we're in a minority, that should affect how we approach the process. For one, don't bring ballot initiatives to your ballot, right, that are for sure going to be struck down, and then a worse, more pro-abortion law is going to come into place, right? Like don't run on the like if certainly if you're a Republican running in California, don't run on the abortion issue. Now don't lie. That's the other thing I want to say. Don't
Hmm.
lie and say you're pro this. Don't run on it. Say, listen, the people of California have decided this issue, and I may have my personal views, but that's not gonna, whatever it is, however you're
Hmm.
gonna handle that as a candidate or whatever. Don't lie, but don't run head first into a blade saw, right? Like prudent. Like what is the saying? Like be um, wise as a serpent, but innocent as a
And
dove. So that's gonna apply.
harmless.
But there was a professor from Hillsdale College that was at the conference in DC that I was at. He's a historian and a historian of the Civil War and the abolitionary period. And he did a presentation on John Newton. He's the author of the song Amazing Grace, but he was like a vile slave trader, right? Like he was like raping, female slaves, beating the men, right? Like he was, just awful guy, right? Like if anybody's ever seen the movie Amazing Grace or read his autobiography, and then he ended up becoming he got some Christian tracts. He became a Christian. Became convicted on the slavery issue, and then he dedicated his life to ending slavery in the British Empire. And he was basically the linchpin of doing this. And then he inspired other abolitionists. But then the main thing that he did is he awoke the churches of Britain up to this problem, to what actually goes on, because there was a lot of people who they knew about slavery and the slave trade, but they didn't know the intimate details about just the barbarity that was involved in this trade. And so he woke up the churches. And there's something that Bert Folsom, he was the professor, said. He's like, the 1700s were the era of abolitionary philosophy, and the 1800s were the era of law catching up to culture. And so we have to, as Christians, as pro-lifers, as conservatives, we have to do the hard work of like discipling people and changing people's hearts and minds so that more people view abortion as the horror that it is. And yes, we should pray every day for the abolition of abortion. Um, but we've got to be prudent, right? I think of the debate between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas. Now, in those debates, when they were running against each other, Abraham Lincoln was not actually running on the full abolitionist. No, Abraham Lincoln, I believe this to his core, was against slavery. He wanted it outlawed, but that's not how he was running. And he consistently said before the Civil War, if I could save the Union without freeing a single slave, I'd do it. But where he drew the line? So Stephen Douglas also, like Lincoln, didn't like slavery and leaned against it. But Stephen Douglas was a hardcore, like whatever the people decide, right? The will of the people. He didn't say this, but vox populi, vox dei, right? The will of the people is the voice of the people is the voice of God, right? Like this, might makes whatever. And Lincoln was very firmly against that. And he was against the expansion of slavery into new territories.
Mm-hmm.
His line, right? And so the line that he wanted to draw, because it was the line that could be drawn at that time, was slavery doesn't extend any further than where it already exists.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought, that, and he truly believed this, and I think he was probably right, would lead to the institution drying up and dying out. And then obviously, the slave states, they too agreed that Lincoln's plan would lead to that, and so they fired on Fort Sumter, and we had the bloodiest war of our history. But like I said, that happened, right? And the Civil War was able to end it, and Lincoln was able to get elected because of the work of people like John Newton and William Wilberforce and even John Brown, who, although his means got a little dicey sometimes, he killed some innocent people. But like those abolitionists that came before, but primarily in Great Britain in the 1700s, that's really where it started. Then it came, to the States as well. And the other thing I will say, for those America haters who always want to talk about, see, America, we're not so great, so there were some American states who took up John Newton's thing actually before Britain. So Britain was the first country to outlaw slavery, but there were American states who outlawed slavery before Britain. Because of this abolitionary movement. So that's what I would say to pro-lifers. We have to, our churches should be active on this issue, right? And like this, and to anyone who says, well, isn't that getting political? No, political is if your church decides to like hold a rally for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, right? Mm-hmm. Talking about a moral issue and taking care of vulnerable women and men, young men, right? Because that is sometimes pro-lifers will talk about love them both, right? Because they're focusing on the woman. But listen, I think we also need to have support for these young, scared fathers in crisis pregnancy centers. And we need to create this culture of life so that someday abortion is so unthinkable and everyone sees it in the proper light. Whereas then we could have, national consensus on the issue. Assuming Christ doesn't.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. We have to take the victories one step at a time. We can't go for the complete victory without preparing the people. And I think drawing closer to the people, making the case. One thing that I don't want to say shocks me, but that I don't see done enough, we need to have more videos about what an abortion actually looks like, right? Because I've seen people do it on YouTube where they go around showing them what an abortion looks like, and that really shocks people into changing their views, because the media does such a good job of making it sound like it's just a clump of cells. But when you look at it and see the reality of what it is, you have to be a cold-hearted, far right, far left liberal to advocate for abortion even up to 9 months. I just want to show something, a meme, that even in all these conversations that I have with you, with other people, that we should take to heart. And it's this. It says, let me see if I shrink it there. It says, the devil doesn't care which political view you take as long as you abandon the character of Christ to defend it. And I think that's important for all of us always, to remember that this world is not our home. That this kingdom is, this country is not our final resting place. And we need to persuade people with the love of Christ to the moral values we seek, and not to an individual personality or party. That being said, last week I spoke solely on Project 2025, and you have some opinions that differ from mine. I think you're wrong, but
Slightly.
we'll let you air them out. I'm going to put it on the screen here, and then we can talk about it. I'm just teasing. All right, but anyway, this is what it says. I'm gonna read it, and then we'll talk about it. It says, "This is from Project 2025, their plan book. Look, there are some things in Project 2025, as I said last week, that I agree with or that I can support in theory. This issue here is close to my heart, and so I want to hear my partner's opinion on it. But let me read this first paragraph. It says, Sabbath rest. See, I have issues right there. Why is government even talking about Sabbath? That's
No, I
that's
would just note this isn't government. This
the
isn't
Heritage
affiliate.
Foundation. I know that. It's not government, but they want to put it in government. Sabbath rest. God ordained the Sabbath as a day of rest, and until very recently, the Judeo Christian tradition sought to honor that mandate by moral and legal regulation of work on that day. Moreover, a shared day off makes it possible for families and communities to enjoy time together off, rather than as atomized individuals and providers a healthcare cadence of life for everyone. Unfortunately, the communal day of rest has eroded under the pressures of consumerism and secularism, especially for low income workers. What about that paragraph? Well, comment on that paragraph. I have some things to say, but we'll continue.
Well, so, but I think like we need to keep reading because the nuance that I'm going to add is
Okay, so you want
I
me to
can
read
read
the
the
next paragraph?
yeah.
Okay, go
Or do you
ahead.
want?
Go ahead,
Or
you
I
can
can.
read it.
Yeah. So Congress should encourage communal rest by amending the Fair Labor Standards Act (FSLA) to require that workers be paid time and a half hours for hours worked on the Sabbath. That day would default to Sunday, except for employers with a sincere religious observance of a Sabbath at a different time, Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. The obligation would transfer to that period instead. Houses of worship, to the limited extent that they may have FLSA covered employees and employers legally required to operate around the clock, such as hospitals and first responders, would be exempt, as would workers otherwise exempt from overtime. So, the first thing I wanted to say, this is not a law or this is not a regulation that I would advocate for, that I
Mm-hmm.
think would be the most prudent use of things. The only reason why I wanted to add nuance is because I've seen a lot of coverage by people of Project 2025 that I think borders into conspiratorial. And I think that can hurt our witness, right, as Christians, whatever. Now, I agree with you, right? And as you've talked about, listen, we believe that in the end times, there's going to come a point where there's going to be enforced worship, right? And that's going to ultimately what's going to usher in the mark of the beast, right? This
Okay,
enforced
okay.
worship.
So let me stop you there for a second. To the audience listening, whoever may be listening to it, before Joey continues, because I know his stance, before Joey continues, ask yourself the question: would you be in favor of enforced worship? Answer that question to yourself. You can put it in the comments or anything, or you can shoot us an email or whatever. But would you be in favor of forced worship? And let me be more specific. Would you be in favor of forced legal Christianity? That's the question. Go ahead, Joey.
Yeah. So to anyone who is leaning to the answer yes, I would urge you to reread the guy who's responsible for our First Amendment, Roger Williams, where he said forced worship stinks in God's nostrils.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so again, with that backdrop, I'm totally against forced worship, right? I think it's
Mm-hmm.
a violation of the Imago Dei, right? Because God has given everyone the right to choose for themselves, right, what side they're on in this great controversy, this spiritual warfare. Um, the reason why I wanted to add nuance in this is because of the way the law is written, right? Whereas, listen, so while this wouldn't be a law I would advocate for, this law does seek to a um, so I'm trying to explain this the best way I can. So there's a difference in law between uh, punitive versus beneficiary or whatever, right? So in other words,
Mm-hmm.
if this law was saying that there's going to be these punishments for people who decide to work on Sunday, or people who don't take a day off. That
Mm-hmm.
would be a problem. If um, if the law, right, because like establishment of religion, right? So if the law were to say, and again, this is a suggestion for a law, how that law would actually be worked out could make the difference between whether it's actual tyranny or whether it's bordering on tyranny or whether it's something else. Um, if the law were to say, listen, Sunday is the day of rest, right? And these companies must honor Sunday, but like, listen, Saturday is not the day of rest. First of all, biblically not true, but that's not the day of rest. Or the Muslims' day of Friday, that's not the day of rest. So screw them, right? Like that also would be because that would be discriminatory. Now,
Mm.
but again, I do think there is a difference between a law that says everyone deserves a day off, right, and they can take a day off of their choosing, and a law that says everyone needs to take this day off for specifically Christian reasons, right? You see, so like that's the difference as to what would be a now. Would I advocate for either law, right? Because like, listen, I get uncomfortable whenever the government is working within the realm of the first four commandments. That makes me uncomfortable, right? So like, no, this wouldn't be something that I'm going to go out there and stump for and advocate for. But I do think when we talk about it, it's important to delineate like what is objectively wrong and what is maybe somewhat worrisome, right? Depending what direction this goes, but depending
Mm.
how the law is implemented, maybe not objectively wrong, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying now, but I still lean more strongly than you do in that I don't like the lingo. Couch it in a different lingo. And it's like kind of what we advocate for marriage, right? Marriage is between a man and a woman. And people have co opted that language for other, what you and I would call civil unions, right? Once you start co opting the language, then, and in that line there, the one that bothers me the most is, let's see if I can highlight it, is this one. Hold on. Oh, yeah, this right here, this whole thing right here. Because the moment you think you can make an exception for something, right, then those who accept the exception are almost as if they are letting the other group dictate what's right and wrong. No, the exception is Sunday, if anything. Know what I mean? Because Sunday is not the right day of the week. Now, as a Sabbath keeper, and I mentioned this in my solo show last week, I wouldn't pass a law that makes people worship on Saturday either, because God is all about liberty of conscience. I just don't like the lingo here to use religious
Yeah,
language for what they want to institute at government level. I understand the notion of rest and having family time, but this is, it's crossing that line too closely for me. Go ahead.
yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I'm not a Project 2025 advocate.
Thumper.
No, there are. Listen, what's funny? So this religious liberty concern that we have, most of the coverage, right, in the media, this historical coverage of Project 2025 has not been on this, right?
No,
Which,
yeah.
by the way, I learned like that's why I wanted to couch the word disagree. It's like I don't really disagree with you. I just wanted to add some nuance to it. That's
Yeah,
all. So
yeah.
that way,
Hmm.
because I think there's a lot of fear mongering, and not you, but on
Yeah,
some
yeah.
other religious YouTube channels and things that I think was a little bit overblown. But as far as like most of the coverage, right? If all of it was over this debate, I think we'd be in a healthier place. But most of the debate is over like the fact that it wants to like deregulate, or the fact that it wants
Yes,
to
exactly. It's
Republicans
foolishness.
have been advocating for cutting government forever. Like there's nothing novel about that, right? Like so,
Hmm.
like there's a lot of individual things in Project 2025 that I think would make fine policy. But no, listen, I hear what you're saying. I also, it's not my favorite language, right? To be talking about a law that's labeling the Sabbath at all, right, or Sunday,
Hmm.
like that's not something I think government should do. But I think again, when we talk about it, we have to make sure we draw those delineations.
Well, I mean,
That's all.
because look, the principle is fine, right? To have more family time, to have less caught up in consumerism. The principles are all fine. It's just
I don't know the answer.
the what happened?
I said a way that like if we were talking to Kevin Roberts of the Heritage Foundation,
Yeah.
a way they could fix it where they could still get that rest time, right? Like, and
Hmm.
for workers stuff protections is just have increased weekend protections.
Yes,
That would be
exactly.
something. Change the law so it says that
The weekends
men
are for family.
yeah, it's for family, and if you work, you have to get time and a half. In a lot of states, that's already the case. But
Mm.
whatever you wanted to do, just couch it in that not religious language of protections for the weekend.
Yeah. That being said, now that you reminded me of something you said. So here's a question. Are you familiar with blue laws?
Yeah, we still have some in the states.
Yeah, we
Actually,
still.
in Michigan, you can't sell. And now, as Adventists, this isn't a big deal for. I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
It's the reason for the law is a big deal, but they can't sell alcohol on Sundays
Before
from
noon.
before noon, and you can't sell alcohol. You can't sell. You can sell beer, but you can't sell spirits within like 300 yards of a church.
Yeah, the
So
devil's
like
juice is what I call
those are
it.
places,
No, but look, I grew up in New Jersey, and New Jersey has blue laws. Paramus, New Jersey, which is higher than average neighborhood, with a nice mall. They're closed on Sundays because of blue laws. And every state has blue laws in the books. Some are enforced, some are not, some are been done away with. But most states.
I'm curious. Does Rhode Island? I wonder if they would, because they were given their founding.
Yeah, no.
if I
Let
read
me
it right.
let me do a quick search. But anyway, most states. I know Texas has them because I used to go golfing with a bunch of. Uh, Here's what I want to say: is that a lot of a lot of states like Texas, which is a red state politically, has blue laws, yet they're and the alcohol thing is enforced, but not heavily, right? But a lot of these states that don't even enforce the alcohol ban haven't repealed the laws. They're still on the books. They're just not enforced. So it's not like if they wanted to enforce them, they'd have to pass them, right? They're on the books. They just turn a blind eye to them. Let me see. Doing a search here real quick. Yes, Rhode Island does have blue laws.
Really?
Which is
Roger Williams is rolling in his grave.
yeah, I know. So that's that. Here's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. Have you seen the movie? I haven't, but I know about it. Have you seen the movie Minority Report?
I have not, but I've heard of it.
Okay, so you know the premise of it, right? That people are being arrested for crimes they're going to commit in the future. Right? So you have
Oh, yeah, Tom Cruise.
yeah. So you have yet to commit the crime, but they know somehow, like I said, I haven't watched the movie, but I know the premise, that somehow they can arrest you for crimes that you're going to commit. So at times, I think that Christians, and some in my denomination, have that kind of view, right? Where they know where America is headed, and yet they're judging people today for what they believe is going to happen in the future. And even myself, I have to be leery of that. Am I judging this person based I know where this is headed? And I actually did that with this Project 2025 and with the Sabbath and the Sunday and all that, because I know where America is headed. And so I had to ponder that for a bit. Am I judging them based on where I know this is headed, as opposed to me not liking the law as it is? And after pondering, I reflected, I don't like the law as it is now, regardless of where it's headed. Because as you and I know on this show, anything that seems to infringe on the first 4 commandments is an issue. Oh, by the way, I wanted to address, and I don't know if they're watching or will watch. There was a young man who made a comment on the blue law thing, saying that he doesn't divide the tablets in 4 and 6. He divides the tablet in 3 and 7 because the Sabbath was made for man. And I don't agree with that, but at most I'd give them the tablets should be 3.5 and 6.5. At the most I would give them, right? Because the first half of the Sabbath commandment is all about my relationship to God. It's the other half that talks about your neighbor, right? That your son or your daughter or your stranger within your gates shouldn't work. And so there's kind of that allusion to the two greatest commandments: love God with all your mind, body, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. So at most I would give them that, but I still stick to the 4 and 10. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with my boy Roger Williams and somebody else that I really like who actually gave a Senate hearing, A.T. Jones. I'm going to stick with A.T. Jones and Roger Williams.
Like I said, at most I'd give them 3.5 and 6.5 at most, but I'm sticking with the 4 and 10.
Can you, for maybe a final topic, can you pull up your screen?
Which one?
Just pull up Twitter and go to Elon Musk's Twitter page.
Okay, give me
and then type in. So you know how when you go to the Twitter page, you can search their Twitter page for past posts. So go to his Twitter page and type in Christianity.
Oh, is that the one you send me?
Yeah, but there's 4 of them, and I want to get your perspective because I think
Okay, hold on. Give me a second. I'm enjoying this. Let me. I got so many Twitter accounts. So let's go.
So this was in reference to the France debacle.
And what am I supposed to look for on his page?
Christianity. And I won't let the irony pass that he's tweeting this while he's got a profile picture of himself in a devil suit. That's what his suit is, in a Satan costume.
So it's a little ironic. Where's the search? Oh, there it is. Christianity.
I mean, I can. If we can't find it, I can read them too.
No, I found it. I was looking for. Oh yeah.
So when I type in Christianity on his page, 1, 2,
Christianity.
Yeah, 4 tweets. 4 tweets come up. So it should be the same, I would think.
Send it to me because I can't find it.
Well, I sent you the first one, but I can't really send you all of them because.
That's fine. It should pop up. All right, let's put it on the screen. Let's see what you got for me. All right, so this is.
That's the first one. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So, first of all, you saw the whole Olympics trans thing, right? The sacrilegious Lord's Supper, the trans.
Now, what do you... hold on, before we go there, what do you think of that? Because some people are trying to say, no, they weren't parodying the Lord's Supper. They were doing that Greek Feast of the Gods. But for all those people who are saying they were doing the Feast of the Gods, the people have come out and said, yeah, they did draw inspiration from the Lord's Supper. So there's that. Go ahead.
Yeah. Dionysus was in it, right? But they were definitely going for that Lord's Supper image of Jesus and then his 12 apostles at the table. Listen, what did I think of it? I thought it was, wrong, right? Like, listen, I think, listen, first of all, I'm a Christian, so I was particularly offended on that ground. But listen, I don't think in public we should go out of our way to mock. Now, maybe Satanism might deserve some mockery, but like religion, like Judaism, Islam. Now, listen, I'll criticize Islam, especially right now, given things that are happening. But listen, a peaceful Muslim, right? Like, I'm not going to go out of my way to insult their faith, right? Yeah. I think that's wrong. I think you should do that, or Jews, or anyone else. Like I said, with the possible exception of Satanists. But what I saw. And Elon, I've been seeing this with him for a while. Obviously, we talked about this with Richard Dawkins' cultural Christianity. So Elon tweets out in the midst of this whole thing, he says, "Unless there is more bravery to stand up for what is fair and right, Christianity will perish." So as a Christian pastor, what would be your response to that?
Yeah, you don't know my Jesus. That's basically my answer because, but look, let's not be too harsh on Elon because he is not a Christian. He's a cultural Christian. He said that recently on the Jordan Peterson interview that he did. So there's one thing like Dawkins, right? There's one thing to understand and appreciate the beauty of the decorum and the respectfulness and the fact that Christianity makes good citizens, even if you're not converted. But that is different than understanding and knowing Jesus personally. This kingdom is not of my world, Jesus said. If I wanted them to fight, I'd have a legion of angels at my protection. Christianity is not going to perish. In matter of fact, Christianity in the end is going to be the only religion standing. And I'm talking about at the end, when Christ comes back, right? You see that in the prophecies of Daniel, where the rock destroys the kingdoms of this world, and that rock represents the kingdom. So I don't fault him too much as I would of some pastors I've seen, progressive liberal pastors, who basically say that all roads lead to heaven, right? Now, God is going to have people that are saved in every faith, whether it's Muslim, but they will be saved on the merits of Jesus Christ, not on the merits of their own religion, but because they were in ignorance or whatever, they will eventually come to a faith-saving relationship in Christ. That's different than Elon Musk. But yeah, he doesn't know my Jesus. I saw people respond to him in a nasty way, but I've seen others respond in a way that lets them know you don't know the Jesus of Christianity. Not in a bad way, but letting them know that it's not going to fade. Your thoughts?
Yeah. So, and I think this will kind of bolster your thesis. Listen, I joked, right? That he's wearing a devil's costume, right? But listen, I think so. Andrew Clavin had this thing where we talked about why he doesn't worry about Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson. He believes God has people on a journey, and he'll move them along it if they're honestly searching after truth. I think that's largely true. And so he, in a response to somebody said, responded to him, if you're going into your born again era, we're so here for it. And then Elon responded, he said, I believe in the principles of Christianity, like love thy neighbor as thyself, have empathy for all, and turn the other cheek, right? End the cycle of retribution. And so, and I don't know, did you watch that interview that you referenced that he did with Jordan
No,
Peterson?
no, not the whole thing.
So what I will say, and I think this cultural Christianity moment actually presents a good opportunity for us, like more than cultural Christians. But what got Elon Musk went in depth with Dr. Peterson about why he bought Twitter, what prompted him to do it, and it was one event. His son Xavier
Yes,
hooked up
I
with
did hear
the
that.
gender, and his son now goes by a different name and lives as a woman, and he went along with it because all the professionals told him, oh, you've got to do this, you can have a dead son, blah, blah, blah. He went along with it, and then when he woke up, he just felt it was like because his son was so far gone down his path, he was angry, and so that's what prompted him to buy Twitter, right? It wasn't financial things. And so, and then when you see all these comments that he's making about cultural Christianity, what I would say, and Andrew Walker, who we reviewed some stuff of his before on the podcast, he said, listen, it's an evangelistic opportunity to look at people who are seeing the fruits of cultural Christianity wither away and they're at a loss, right? To then we can say, listen, if you think these cultural Christianity things were good, well, then let us tell you about the guy who emanated all these other things, right? Like real Jesus and a real faith. So it's like using cultural Christianity and the people who recognize it, use that as a witnessing tool to the validity of the gospel and the validity and the truth claims of Jesus and of the Bible.
Yes, and that's where, once again, you alluded to, we have to be wise as serpent and harmless as doves. Look, Elon Musk is headed in the right direction. How can I say that? Because anyone that protects liberty of conscience is still what's the word, receptive enough to eventually hear the gospel. Now, whether he chooses the gospel is a different story. But anyone who protects liberty of conscience, like we try to do on this show, um, is still of tender-hearted conscience in order to weigh the evidence and hopefully surrender to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Is this the picture you were talking about?
Yeah, so that's the thing he's wearing.
Yeah.
So it's like a Baphomet,
Mm-hmm.
like
So,
I don't know what the occasion was, but yeah,
yeah.
it's not great. But
It's
like I said, people are works in progress. So
yeah.
the other thing I would say is, I
Yeah.
think as Christians, see, it's got the Baphomet on
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
chest. I think as Christians, something that we need to do more in our churches and in our personal lives is pray for our leaders, right? Pray for the
Yes.
leaders of industry. Pray for pray for both presidential candidates and the president who's not a candidate. Pray
Mm-hmm.
for all of these people, and maybe pray a little harder for the one that you hate the most, right? So, like for me, I can't stand Kamala Harris. Maybe I need to spend a little bit more time praying for her and praying that she would have a conversion, because ultimately these famous people, and this was something that kind of hit me too last week, seeing some people that were more like, much more famous than me, but seeing them in
Mm-hmm.
real life, being able to talk to them, it's like, wait a minute, these are just people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the people that we see, those congressmen who we may want to like drive our head through the wall because they're so dumb
Mm-hmm.
sometimes in Congress on the floor. It's like they're people, right? Jesus died to save them too, and so we should pray for them, right? Like
Well,
send
let
them
me
a
jump in
gospel.
here. Let me jump in here. Ready? So use your imagination here, right? Block off everything you know about the current political candidates and put yourself in Judea during the time of the exile or right before the exile, right? So so you're thinking, right? You're there now and you hear Jeremiah and Ezekiel saying you have to give in to Nebuchadnezzar. Your natural response would be like, that guy's a tyrant. He's a womanizer. He's a murderer. He's a etc. Nebuchadnezzar was worse than any of these two candidates, if we're honest with ourselves, because he would kill people at a whim, right? And yet, alluding to the point you're saying, the reason why we have to pray for Trump and Kamala, and so I'm not saying this for one or the other, is that you don't know what the Lord can do in their lives. Nebuchadnezzar, at that time, the people in Israel were saying, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, you guys have lost your freaking mind. How are we supposed to go along with Nebuchadnezzar coming and taking our city? But that's what God commanded. Now, they didn't know that. Ezekiel and Jeremiah knew because they had a direct connection to God, but the people didn't know. They had to trust, right? And so I'm not saying either one of them, in the end, they could both be Pharaoh and be lost. But what if one of them is Nebuchadnezzar? Either one, right? Which is why we have to understand that God is in control. And even though I may refute the policies of either one, even though I may not like the moral display of either one, you know what last makes me crack up? Like I said, I'm not a Trump fan either. But people saying that Trump is an adulterer, womanizer, and we shouldn't vote for him. Well, how did Kamala get her head start? No pun intended, right? And so, and so, both of them have a dubious past, including the current president, right? So we have to pray for them because if Nebuchadnezzar could be saved, who's to say Trump or Kamala?
Just
And
so
go
I've
ahead.
thought about this a lot in the context of Nebuchadnezzar.
Mm-hmm.
What if, right? Because like God is still just as active and just as capable.
Mm-hmm.
What if God like took the guy who put everything in gold, right, and his name on every building, and like caused him to go and like live in like the mountains of Montana as like a wild bison, right, or something for like a couple of years, and then he comes back and he's like, "I'm the most humble, I'm most humble." Well,
Hey.
like that's what God did for in those who aren't familiar, right? You want the
Mhm.
one part of the Bible, the Old Testament, that was written by a non-Jew, the Book of Daniel, chapter 4, where it's Nebuchadnezzar writing his testimony of how God
Change
humbled him.
them.
Pretty
Yeah.
crazy. Just
So,
imagine him doing that to Kamala or Trump.
yeah. So that being said, the Bible. Last thing I'll say before I wrap us up. The Bible says, "Speak evil of no one, and be careful about how you speak of kings." That's not saying you can't disagree with their policies or disagree with some of their moral choices. Choices, but I'm not going to be insulting them um, because they too are a child of God. Joey, last thoughts before I wrap us up because I gotta call my mama.
Yeah,
Seriously.
no, I would just say hold your like as we're going into election season, right? It's all heating up, right? Like pray about what you're going to do in November, right? And then vote your conscience, right? If you like me, you can't pull the lever for either of the major ones, maybe do a protest vote for someone who
Mm-hmm.
I'll put a plug in for Candy Rice. I love her. And Nikki, whoever it is, somebody who represents your values, do that, right? If you do come down at the end of the day in the confines of your conscience after praying about it, where you land on one of these two options, I I may let's just say this: I don't agree with you, but like that's your right, and so I'm not going to say that that's wrong for you to do. Just pray about how you're going to steward your vote. Make sure you know what's happening in all of the down ballot elections and ballot initiatives and different things that are on the ballot. Know all that, be informed, and then do your best. Right, do your best as a citizen, and that's all we can do. We got to leave the rest to God.
Yes. On that note, on the Gio and Joey show, until next time, we have a special guest, right? Next week. All right.
Return.
We'll leave it there and we'll advertise it pretty soon. Be blessed.